What's up, boys? I just gotta do my daily routine, make sure everything's working well. Sorry about this.
What's up, boys?
Yep, we're all good. All right, so definitely an eventful day. Past couple days for the UFC, I will say. I'm not really gonna get too much into the Bryce Mitchell thing, but that definitely has dominated the headlines in the MMA world. Very interesting, to say the least. But um, but the first news that I actually want to talk about is this: Dana White has hinted that there's going to be a big fight potentially coming for Islam Makhachev, and there's a couple of different options for what I thought this could possibly be. Obviously, he's at 155 right now. It seems like Charles is going to be next for that shot, but it seems like when Dana's talking about a potentially really big fight, it's probably not going to be Charles. So some guys that I was thinking that it could potentially be was DDP. There was some talk of that a while ago. Shavkat possibly if he wins the belt, or Ilia Topuria, and there's obviously been a lot of talk about Ilia as well. But I am not confident in any of those guys. It could be somebody else. The only reason being is because DDP obviously has a fight against Strickland, and if they're already talking about a potentially big fight coming soon, I don't know if it'd be DDP, as DDP has a fight coming up soon. So I don't know if it's that. And also, there was from today or yesterday, there was a video of Dana talking about Islam potentially moving up 2 weight classes to fight DDP, and he wasn't necessarily too keen on that idea. So I'm not sure if it's DDP, but obviously there has been some buzz about it and could possibly be an option. For Shavkat, it is a little bit of a similar thing. Um, Shavkat obviously isn't the champ yet. A lot of people think he's going to beat Bilal, including myself, but he's not the champ yet, and that fight isn't even booked yet. So I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the next fight either. And the last one for Ilia Topuria, there's been a lot of talks about that. Obviously, Ilia wants to move up to 155 and fight Islam for the belt. That would be a generational fight. I truly think Ilia is the best chance that anybody has in beating Islam Makhachev. It just seems like Islam is so well rounded from the feet to the ground. He literally has everything out there. And for the majority of the opponents that he's went up against, when you talk about a guy like Dustin Poirier or some others, he just has such an advantage on the ground that even though Dustin Poirier is a better striker than Islam Makhachev, Islam was having a ton of success on the feet due to the grappling threat. Really, the only guy, I know it's a short, small sample size, it was a very quick fight, but the only guy that I saw have some level of success, obviously, very short amount of time the fight lasted, but was Hanato Moicano, ironically enough, and it could be due to the length that he does possess. Maybe he's not afraid of getting taken down, and I do think that's a real key to beating a guy like Islam Makhachev. And I think Ilia Topuria has a similar mindset out there. Obviously, Ilia is a tremendous striker, and I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if he does knock out Islam Makhachev. But the biggest factor to me is the fact that he can grapple. I'm not saying Dustin can't grapple, but it appears that Ilya is on a different level than Dustin Poirier. And I would still assume Islam is the better grappler than even Ilya, but it would be a lot closer, I believe. Islam obviously has the size, he has the strength, you would assume, but I don't know. I feel like Islam would not be afraid, or sorry, Ilya would not be afraid of getting taken down. So I do think that's a big factor, and I guess that could possibly be the next fight. Outside of those three matchups, though, I don't really know. I can't even think of any other possible matchups. Um, and yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. I really don't know. Because all those three matchups would be really fun, really exciting, but I was able to poke holes in all of them. So I don't know if any of those three are going to be next, but we'll see what happens for Islam. We do know we're probably going to have to wait a little bit, as he's not really going to be fighting before. He's not really going to be fighting before. Sorry about that, boys. But he's not going to be fighting before March, obviously, or in March in general. So we'll have to wait a little bit to see who Islam does fight next. But yeah, but moving on, Let's talk about the UFC schedule. So, obviously, this weekend we have UFC Saudi. I've already made a few live streams already talking about this. I have a video that came out recently about Char and Michael Page going into that fight in depth. Check that out if you guys haven't seen it. But I just wanted to talk about the main event. I didn't make a video about it, so I'll just talk about it now. The main event is an interesting one. Obviously, Israel Adesanya has been a guy who's been tremendous for a really long time. Um, and on paper, I do believe that he should beat Imavov here. Imavov is a very good striker. He has tremendous speed. He's going to probably be significantly faster than Izzy is. But I would say overall on the feet, Izzy does have the better ability. His kicking game is tremendous to the legs, body, and head. His use of length is going to be huge in this fight, I believe. His jab's going to be nice. Right straight's going to be nice. Hooks when Imavov does try to close distance and come in close. I think that also could be a pretty big factor for Izzy. But I do think this is a relatively binary fight. If this fight stays on the feet for the most part, I believe Izzy's going to win by decision. If Imavov is able to mix in those takedowns effectively, I think it's going to be much harder for Izzy. Imavov is not a tremendous grappler. He's a good grappler. He had some good moments in his last fight versus Brennan Allen, which Brennan Allen's a great grappler, but Brennan Allen got very, very tired. He significantly gasses out in a lot of his fights. So I don't know how much I truly take away from that. I think Imavov is just a good grappler, not a great grappler. Izzy's a guy who has tremendous takedown defense, especially alongside the cage. So overall, I think my pick for this fight is going to be Izzy by decision. I think if he's able to stay on the feet, which I do think he will be able to, maybe there'll be a couple times where he gets taken down in this matchup. But for the most part, I think he'll stay on the feet. And if that's true, I think he's going to be able to dictate where the fight is on the feet. If it's in close or at distance, obviously Izzy prefers the fight to be at distance. And I think he'll be successful in that. But we'll see. Obviously, as I said, there are paths to victory for Imavov. He is very fast. He can catch Izzy by surprise. Izzy also has a tremendous chin, which is going to help him out. But I think on paper, Izzy should win. Obviously, there is some concern and some people saying that Izzy's mentality might not necessarily be there, that he already won the belt a few times. He said publicly that he doesn't really have anything left to do. And Imavov is a young up-and-comer, a hungry young up-and-comer that that obviously wants to win the belt, and this would be basically a requirement for him to do that. So the mentality obviously is different between these two guys, so that could possibly be a factor. But in my opinion, I'm still sticking with Izzy. I just think the raw skill is there for Izzy. He has an advantage in that. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But moving on to MVP Shar, I won't go in depth too much on this fight. I think MVP is going to win. And to be completely honest, I think it's a little bit interesting, to say the least, that Shar is as big of a favorite as he is. He's like a minus 200 favorite, minus 190 favorite, which is honestly crazy to me based on his performances. Obviously, he had some impressive performances. Like he had some nice finishes, some pretty dominant decision wins, but the level of competition that he went up against is nowhere near the level of MVP. So I find that a little bit interesting, but we'll see what happens in that matchup. And yeah, Sergey versus Rosenstrike. I'm definitely leaning with Sergey. I'm leaning Sergey first round finish like he usually used to do before losing a couple of his fights recently. But I do think Rosenstrike is live. I wouldn't pick him. I wouldn't even bet him, to be honest. But there is a possibility that he can avoid a lot of the strikes that Sergey throws and find a big counter shot and knock Sergey out. Because Sergey obviously has been knocked out before. It was by Tom Aspinall, the best fighter in that division. But regardless, his lights can certainly be put out. And I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if Rosenstrike did find a way to land. Because the one thing I will say about Sergey is he has a tremendous reach. He has a pretty good chin, tremendous reach, a ton of power, but he doesn't necessarily mix things up. He throws basically one combination throughout the entire fight. If it works, great, he'll get an early finish. But if it doesn't work, he's never going to change it. And I think we saw a lot of that in the Volkov fight, as he throws a jab, a right straight in the same sort of cadence. He throws that sort of combination. If it lands, great. If it doesn't, He'll wait and then he'll do the exact same thing again. He doesn't throw any kicks. There's really no diversity to his striking, which is definitely a huge flaw for Sergey. I mean, it's heavyweight. He has a lot of power and he's has a tremendous reach, so he has been able to get away with it for the most part. But I think against certain guys, like we saw against Tom Aspinall, and also as we saw against Volkov, people could possibly take advantage of the lack of diversity in Sergey's striking. And I'm not necessarily saying Rosenstruck's going to be the guy to do it. I don't think so. But I do want to throw that out as a possibility. I don't think it's an absolute guarantee that Sergey wins this fight, as a lot of people think. But as I said, Sergey round one finish is my prediction. But moving on to the next fight, Vinicius Oliveira versus Nurmagomedov. This is an interesting one. I think I touched upon this before in a different video or a different live stream, but I actually am kind of high on Vinicius Oliveira. On the feet, he has a decent technical ability, not tremendous if we're being honest. But the great thing about Oliveira is he's super explosive. In some of his fights, he got taken down. He wasn't winning early, but he stayed with it and then eventually found a finish late. It kind of just seems like Oliveira just figures out a way to win. In his most recent fight, actually, he put on a pretty dominant 3-round performance. But it just seems like this guy is very explosive. He only needs one shot to land in order to knock out his opponent. And Nurmagomedov obviously does have a lot of talent on the feet. He's got great kicks on the ground. He has actually a tremendous ninja choke. We'll see if that comes into play in this fight. And I do think he's very talented, but at the end of the day, I think I'm leaning towards Oliveira. I think the explosiveness that he does have is going to be huge in this fight, and yeah, we'll see what happens. But moving on to Ziam and Mike Davis, I'm definitely leaning Mike Davis. Ziam is on a 3 or 4 fight win streak. He had a really impressive knockout over Steamroller in his last fight. But still, I'm not super high on Ziam, to be completely honest. Outside of Steamroller, he hasn't had any finishes on his UFC career, on his UFC record at least. And he looks decent, but he doesn't look tremendous in my opinion. And I think Mike Davis is a really, really good fighter, actually. He's great on the feet, great on the ground, has tremendous IQ out there, good amount of power, and really just understands what to do out there. The biggest thing that everybody talks about Mike Davis is he doesn't fight enough. This guy's extremely talented. I think he's a top 10 guy in the lightweight division, to be completely honest, maybe even better. I'm very, very high on Mike Davis. I just wish he would fight a little bit more. But moving on to the prelims, we got Naimov versus Keane. I'm definitely going Naimov here. I'm actually very confident in that. I think he's going to win, but yeah. But moving on to Gaziev versus Thomas Peterson. Sorry. I'm definitely leaning Gaziev. I don't think Gaziev is all that good, but I think Peterson is worse. That's where my prediction comes into here. I think Gaziev is going to be able to find probably a late second, early third round TKO finish. That's my prediction, but I'm very confident that he will win, regardless if it's a finish or a decision. But moving on to Terrence McKinney versus Demir. I'm definitely leaning Terrence McKinney as well in this fight. It just seems like Demir probably should have retired a long time ago. On the feet, he definitely has some ability. McKinney doesn't necessarily have the most technical ability on the feet, so maybe there's an opportunity there. But I also don't think Demir hits nearly hard enough to really knock guys out. It's possible, but I don't think it's very likely. And McKinney on the feet does have that knockout power. On the ground, I think it's his easiest path to victory. But on the ground, he could easily get a submission as well. I just think there's a lot of ways to win for Terrence McKinney. And I'll say a first-round finish. If it's a TKO or a submission, we'll see. But I'll say first-round finish. And then talking about Jasmine Jasovicius and Mayra Bueno Silva, I'm definitely leaning with Jasmine. Bueno Silva is coming off a few losses, I believe. I know she lost in her championship fight due to a cut, but seemed like she was probably going to lose that fight anyway. And Jasmine is kind of just on a win streak right now. So I'm definitely leaning with Jasmine. Decent wrestling as well. Good top pressure, top time, and does damage from the top as well. So I definitely do like that. And moving on to Hamdi against Pages. I'm definitely going with Hamdi. Both guys are kind of blobs out there, to be completely honest. But I think Hamdi does have better technical ability than Jamal. But yeah, so that's the card for UFC Saudi. Should be good. I actually am very excited for it. From top to bottom, it looks like a really good card. Way better than UFC 312, which is almost crazy that this is a pay-per-view card. The main event and co-main event, in all fairness, is very, very good. But outside of that, Justin Tafa versus a guy that's coming off the Dana White Contender Series as your third fight on a pay-per-view is kind of crazy. I don't know. It seems like it's too late. I don't think they're going to add any more fights to it at this point. There's some fun fights, but not really pay-per-view worthy fights on this card. But but yeah, hopefully it turns out to be good. A lot of times, fights that look or cards, I should say, that don't look good whatsoever turn out to be pretty fun and pretty good. So it's possible that happens. We'll see what happens. But yeah, definitely not super excited. We got Jared Cannonier versus G Rod. But what I wanted to talk about is this. So recently, I haven't really talked about it, but there was a couple of fight announcements. Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. This is going to be a great fight. This is a fight that fans wanted for a long time, and we're finally going to get it. And although a lot of people going into this initially thought Ankalaev will be able to run through Pereira with his wrestling, Ankalaev has said time in and time again that he does not want to wrestle. And if he doesn't wrestle against Pereira, I think things can get bad. Now, I will say Ankalaev is a very underrated striker. He's very talented. When you watch him on the feet, it's very clear that he sees a lot of the shots coming his way. He's pretty defensively sound, but also he does a great job at getting his own shots off and finding finishes or finding decision victories. Whatever his opponents are giving him is what he takes, and he finds victories that way. So I do think it's possible that he knocks out Alex Pereira. I think it's very less likely that he beats Pereira by decision, at least if it's on the feet. But in my opinion, I think I said this time in and time again, and it still holds true. Alex Pereira is extremely technical on the feet. He has a lot of power as well. Not essentially knocks out everybody. And I think if you're fighting Alex Pereira for 5 rounds or even 3 rounds, and the fight's on the feet for the majority of the time, you're probably going to lose and you're probably going to get knocked out. I just think Pereira is too good. But specifically looking at this matchup, I think leg kicks are going to be huge. Obviously, Jan Blachowicz gave Ankalaev a lot of problems with those leg kicks, like a lot of problems. And it seemed like Ankalaev did not want to wrestle at all in that fight. But after the second round was over, both of his legs were done essentially at that point, and he had to wrestle. Ended up finding a draw at the end of it, but regardless, I think that could also be a factor in this fight. Maybe in the first round, Ankalaev doesn't want to wrestle, but Pereira chews up his legs. Maybe he lands some shots. Maybe he lands a left hook, hurts him. It's possible. And then in round two, Ankalaev decides to shoot in for takedowns and try to win that way. But I will say, though, even if Ankalaev does shoot in for takedowns, Pereira has certainly improved on his takedown defense, or even when he gets taken down, his ability to get back up, or when he gets taken down and put in bad positions, he's able to stay alive and not get submitted or get put in worse positions. So I do think Alex Pereira is competent, even if he does get taken down at surviving at the very least. Not really landing his own damage or throwing up submissions or anything like that, although it's possible, but I don't think that's very likely. But I think Pereira is very competent in just staying safe, and possibly finding an area to get back up. But also outside of that, even if Pereira is in a bad position, let's say Ankalaev has his back somehow, Ankalaev doesn't have any submissions in the UFC, I don't believe. If he does, he only has one, and he hasn't done so in a long time, but I'm pretty sure he has none. So he's not really a submission threat. In terms of his ground and pound, it's also not really amazing. So I don't necessarily think this is a bad fight for Alex Pereira. It is a wrestler, yes, but a very good wrestler at that. I'll give it to Ankalaev. But I do think the lack of IQ could come into play here for Alex Pereira, in his favor for Alex Pereira. And even if Ankalaev does look to wrestle, he's going to need to win essentially via top time and hope Pereira doesn't stop takedowns or get back up if he gets taken down. Because I don't know if the submission threat is really there, or even the KO ability on the ground via ground and pound shots. But the other fight that we have here is Justin Gaethje and Dan Hooker. This is going to be an absolute banger, an absolute war. A lot of people are definitely going with Justin Gaethje, and I definitely see it. Gaethje has been tremendous, like essentially throughout his entire career. And Dan Hooker is kind of going through a weird phase where he was great, then he was terrible, and now he's great again. So it's definitely interesting. It'll be interesting to see which version of Dan Hooker we get. I think we're going to get a good version of Dan Hooker for this Gaethje fight. Um, I don't necessarily know who wins. Maybe uh, honestly, I think maybe I lean Dan Hooker, to be completely honest. Gaethje is coming off a really bad knockout loss, and Dan Hooker is pretty hot at this point. So maybe I do lean with Dan Hooker. But regardless, it should be a really good fight. I think there's going to be a lot of damage in this fight both ways. So it should definitely be a good one, and definitely something I'm excited about. The rest of this card is looking, interesting. I'll say interesting at this point, but yeah, not really too much news on this Friday Eve or on UFC Saudi Friday Night Eve. But but yeah, should be good. I'm definitely excited for tomorrow. We'll see what happens in all these fights. I'll be tweeting along. Follow me on Twitter or X if you guys don't already. I'll be tweeting along the results, my thoughts on certain fights. Hopefully, we get no robberies, but if we do, I'll be tweeting about it and or Xing about it, whatever it's called. But yeah, should be exciting. Should be fun. Definitely, I'm excited. Be on the lookout for some videos coming out of my channel next week. I'll have my normal long form video coming out on Tuesday or Wednesday. I know I said my schedule is every Tuesday, and sometimes I've been posting on Wednesday. But there's just a couple of issues with editing, and sometimes I get it out a day later. But we'll iron out the kinks for sure. But my goal is to get videos uploaded on Tuesday. But if it comes out on Wednesday on a certain week, it just is what it is at that point. Just be on the lookout for that. But it's going to be 2 p.m. either Tuesday or Wednesday. But once we get everything ironed out, it's going to be Tuesdays strictly. So that should be good. But yeah, that should be good. I'm definitely excited. So we'll see what happens in all these fights. But anyways, boys, I hope you guys enjoyed. Check out that video on Tuesday. Follow me on X for updated fight predictions or fight reactions. And yeah. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed for those of you who are here, and I appreciate it, and see you guys next time. Peace out, guys. Remember, every Friday, 4 p.m. But anyways, see you boys next time.